Hello, everybody, and welcome. My name is Lizzie Meister. I'm the Public Programs Manager at the Museum of the Southern Jewish Experience, and I'm thrilled to get to welcome you to this virtual program this evening as we hear from our alumni panelists about life at the home. In just a moment, we'll do those intros, but before we get really started with this, we always have some Zoom housekeeping that we need to get through. So please, if you are not a speaker tonight, we ask you to stay on mute. We encourage folks to ask questions. We'll have a question and answer period at the end, and you can do that via the chat. And so keep those questions flowing. A recording of today's presentation will be available in the coming days, so you can share it with your families and friends and also revisit this conversation. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Marlene Trestman. She's guiding tonight's presentation. She is the guest curator of the Museum of the Southern Jewish Experience current special exhibition about the Jewish Orphans Home. Most Fortunate Fortunates, the name of her wonderful book, as well as the name of our special exhibition. And this exhibition runs through January 2026. So if you haven't seen it yet, please come, and perhaps, very likely, there will also be a virtual opportunity to engage as well. Marlene is the author of 2 books, both of which led her to writing, to being part of the special exhibition. Her first book, Fair Labor Lawyer, is the biography of Bettye Margolin, a trailblazing New Deal lawyer who grew up in the home several decades before Sam and Bettye. Marlene's second book, from which our special exhibition borrows its title, is the first comprehensive history of the home, which was the first purpose-built Jewish orphanage in the nation. Both books are available at our museum store, which is online and in person, and I'll drop a link in a moment for those. Marlene is a native New Orleanian, and she grew up as a client of the Jewish Children's Regional Service, which was the successor to the orphanage. In addition to prizes and grants that supported her research and glowing reviews of her books, Marlene has just been awarded a Simon Rockower Award for the American Jewish Press Association for her recent article about the U.S. Jewish orphanages that was published in B'nai B'rith magazine. Again, this conversation is going to last about 35-40 minutes, and we'll have opportunity at the end to ask questions. So please type those into the chat, and we will get to as many as we can during the question and answer period. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Marlene Trestman.
Thanks, Lizzie.
They're off the screen.
Thanks, Liz. We can hear everybody who's not unmuted, not muted. Thanks, Lizzie, and I am delighted to be here this evening for this program. And although you might think that the history of one relatively small orphanage should fit into a 300+ page book, plus a companion online supplement on my website with profiles of more than 360 of the home's children and counting, and the stunning special exhibition that fills the walls and many display cases of the museum's gallery, Lizzie and I knew that there were still many more personal stories to tell. Sam Brody and Bettye Sawl Eisner, both of whom I write about in the book, have graciously agreed to talk tonight about their time in the home during its last decade. Now, before I introduce them, I just want to make a few comments about the home. First, the name of the home. Bettye and Sam would probably bristle if I said that they grew up in the Jewish Orphans Home. They knew the residence as the Jewish Children's Home, which stopped being called the Jewish Orphans Home in 1924, more than a decade before they got there, to reflect the fact that most of the children by that time, and even throughout most of the home's time, had at least one living parent, if not both. Now, second, please remember, there are no representative children of the home. No 2 children, if you're a parent or you know a child, you know that no 2 children are alike. No 2 children experience the same things the same ways, even if they were there at the same time. And of course, the home, it was in operation for 90 years. And even the same child could have very conflicting emotions and sentiments about their own time in the home. I'll also note that Bettye and Sam are just two of the more than 1,600 children that ever lived in the home. At the time Bettye and Sam lived there, the population of the home had dwindled due to a confluence of national economic and social welfare trends. When Bettye arrived in 1940, just 6 years before the home closed, the home, which was then on St. Charles Avenue, had housed a maximum of 173 children in 1915. But when Bettye arrived, and that was 4 years after Sam got there were only 65 children living there. And when both of them left the home at different months in 1946, only 32 children, from toddlers to teens, remained in that once grand and now cavernous structure. Well, Bettye's joining us today from Fresno, California. In addition to helping her husband Willard run his business, Bettye, who attended Tulane University before her marriage, has been a homemaker and a commercial interior decorator. Sam is joining us from his home outside Boston with his wife Eleanor, where they've lived since his retirement. With his degrees in chemistry from the University of Tennessee at both Chattanooga and Knoxville, and after his service in the U.S. Air Force, Sam made his career as a chemist engineer and inventor, ending with his time at Eastman Kodak. And although I interviewed each of them extensively for my book, I'm delighted this is our first time having a live face-to-face, albeit virtual meeting. So it's great to see you. So Bettye and Sam, I'm going to ask each of you the same questions, and we'll get through as many as I can. And again, we want to leave about 20 minutes or so for the questions that I hope our audience will be putting in the chat box at the bottom of the screen. Just click where it says chat. And if your question is for a particular person, note who that is. So Bettye and Sam, tell us where you were living at the time and what were the circumstances that brought you to the home. Bettye, let's start with you.
Right. I was living with my mother and my siblings, and we were from New Orleans. We always lived in New Orleans, and my father passed away. And so we were in a position of helping each other and having our mother help us as much as she could, and she did. And so it was a quiet time. Well, the war was on, and so there was some of that happening. Many of the kids that were there, I think Sam probably remembers, their father was basically in the service. And the mothers were basically trying to help whatever they could in any way with the war effort.
And Bettye, you went into the home with siblings, right?
Yes, I had three other siblings, my sister Shirley, Irene, my older sister, and my brother Jack. And maybe Sam remembers Jack. I think he was very active in doing things around the home and maybe got in a little bit of a trouble time because he was so hyper, full of life. But Sam, you tell me how you felt.
Yes, I'll turn it over to you. Tell us where you were living at the time and the circumstances that brought you to the home.
I was living in Chattanooga, Tennessee with my grandmother and two older brothers. And when my grandmother died, then my two older brothers, one of them was a college senior, and he went to live with one of his classmates. And my other brother, who was 7 years older than me, went to live with a bachelor uncle who owned a grocery store. And I came to the home.
And how old were you, Sam, when you arrived in 1936?
I was 7 years old. I was
And
born,
Betty?
I
Go
think it was about the same age, but later.
I was born in 1929 in April.
Very good, very good. Now, when Betty and Sam, when you lived in the home, the superintendent, the long time and final superintendent was Harry Ginsberg. Supervisors included Inga Friedlander Elsis and Wanda Packard, and you were surrounded by a number of student counselors who attended Tulane or LSU, young men and women studying law or medicine or social work, who received room and board at the home in exchange
Right.
for watching over you all. So let's start with Sam. Sam, can you share a memory of a relationship with one or more members of the home staff that impacted you in some way?
Well, frequently after supper, some of us would gather on the porch and a counselor might come in and we would just have a chat. And unfortunately, this one particular counselor who was a medical student, we had some really interesting conversations. Unfortunately, I don't remember his name. And but the association with most of the counselors was friendly. I think occasionally I would have a disagreement significantly with one, but not really of any extent. So unfortunately, I can't remember. Now, one of the counselors was a former home person, and I'm not even sure he was a counselor, Woodrow Polawata. I know that
He was a med student.
That's right. That's right.
So he helped set up our dark room, and Jimmy Whitehead and myself were the principal functionaries who worked in the dark room. And Woodrow was in there one day and was spilled some stuff on himself, and he didn't care. So we knew something was wrong, and so we called, and he had had some kind of medication that made him just not worry about it. But he was okay after that. And I think he was a former member of the home before I got there.
And we're going to come back to that photography in a minute after we let Betty answer the same question. Betty, talk about a relationship that was important to you with either the superintendent or a counselor or a supervisor.
Okay. First, I want to tell you, I remember Sam. He was older than I was. He was very athletic and very good at that, whatever he decided to do. And they were always playing ball. And that was you, Sam. And you were thought of as being a really nice, good, older guy. And so I enjoyed knowing you. Now, the question is, who did I have a special relationship with? Okay. My special relationship was with Harry Ginsberg. I had been chosen to help somebody in his family who had a granddaughter and was being taken care of by him. And I was, the same age sort of. And he came and asked me if I would consider being her friend and helping her, in the home. She wasn't enrolled. She was a visitor, sort of. And so I said, sure, that was fine. So that was my special relationship was Harry Ginsberg.
Terrific. And Lizzie, if you can pull it up, I'd love for you to show some of the photographs that reflect what Sam learned, perhaps from that counselor. Now, Sam, tell us first of all, are you in this picture, and what's this about?
Well, this is on the levee of the Mississippi River, about 3 miles from the home. And I'm the person sitting in front, and to my right is Morris Scalca, and the person standing up is Joe Friedman, and the person across from me is, it's either Jimmy or Charles Whitehead.
Oh, I thought it might be Jack. My brother, it sort of looks like him, but it isn't. Okay.
And what are y'all doing here, Sam?
I'm sorry.
What are you doing in this picture?
Well, we were down at the levee playing, having mud fights, and this vehicle was there, so I guess we just climbed up on it. It doesn't belong to us, of course, and had a camera there and took the picture.
Terrific. And then the next slide, Lizzie, just two more pictures I want Sam to talk about, which relates to, I guess, supervision or lack thereof in the home. Tell us what's going on in these two pictures.
Okay, well, the picture on the right, we're in the attic and looking into the courtyard, and the picture to the left is the boys' dormitory, the upstairs and downstairs, and a part of the courtyard. The picture on the left, there are three of us in the picture, and obviously one of us took the picture. So I'm the person, they're standing on my shoulder is Jack, all of a sudden I forgot his name.
Pessis.
Jack Pessis, and I'm trying to figure out, I think that's Jimmy Whitehead. It could be his brother Charlie, but I think it's Jimmy. And we were on one of the, I don't know if you call it a cornice or whatever it is, but we were right up there at the top of the building in front of the home, and just doing what we shouldn't be doing, I guess.
I guess, right, getting into trouble. I guess this reflects that you all were given a pretty wide range of freedom to just be teenagers when you were in the home.
Yes, so we weren't, I'm not even sure we were teenagers. Certainly Jack Pessis wasn't a teenager. And if we're a teenager, we're a very young teenager.
And that's you in the front with the glasses, right?
Yes.
Terrific. Okay, thanks, Lizzie. You can take those off now. Now, Bettye, as we mentioned before, you entered the home with your three older siblings.
Yeah.
And Sam, you entered by yourself, leaving your two older brothers back in Chattanooga. So
Yeah.
tell me, each of you, do you recall being homesick, and how did having or not having your own biological siblings in the home matter? Bettye, answer if you would.
Okay. No, we didn't. I didn't feel it. From a personal standpoint, it was simply that I was not seeing my mother all day long, but she did come in the evening and see us. Sometimes she would bring food, and we would sit in the courtyard at the home, and we would be with her. And on weekends, we would be allowed to go with our mother or father and spend that time with them. So it was more like you didn't have to be lonely because there was still family around me personally. So I didn't. I don't know about you, Sam. How'd you feel?
When we first got there, I was very homesick, and I don't know how long it took me to more or less normalize and not be homesick, but it did take a while. But then afterwards, I wasn't homesick. I corresponded with my aunt, who was essentially my substitute parent, and I was not homesick at all. After I got to be a certain age, I was able to go home to Chattanooga in the summertime, and then every year thereafter, I think starting when I was 11 years old, and it was only 4 years after I was at the home. So initially, very much homesick. And then after I normalized, I wasn't.
Just curious, how'd you get back and forth from the home to Chattanooga those summers? Do you recall?
I beg your pardon?
How did you get back and forth from the home to Chattanooga those summers, if you recall?
Well, amazingly, to me anyway, my first trip back to Chattanooga was on a train by myself from New Orleans to Chattanooga, and my family were there to meet me at the station. And it wasn't just my immediate close family, but there must have been about 7 or 8 people there to meet me. And and then I traveled on the train by myself after that. And that was really starting to be an area where the military was being on trains and so forth, but it was quite comfortable and surprisingly for an 11-year-old.
A big adventure, no doubt, a big adventure. So
Yeah.
each of you attended Newman School through the younger grades, and Bettye, you went on to finish, like most of the other kids in the home attended Newman. And just so everyone knows, the home founded Newman School in 1903, so its wards could have an excellent education, at the same time learning side by side with tuition paying children from the community. How did your Newman classmates, some of whom were from the wealthiest families in New Orleans, treat you and other kids from the home? Bettye, you start.
Oh, uh, they were very nice, very respectful, but it depended on your personality too. Were you the kind of child that would be, subservient? No, I wasn't. I was a big chatterbox, and I had a lot of good friends. They came from, you're right, very wealthy surroundings, and it was easy for you to want that for yourself. So you not only got your education, but you kind of decided how you wanted to structure your life by seeing these very fortunate kids do well. Not that I and my family was destitute, we weren't, and I don't think Sam's was either, but these kids were a very special level in New Orleans. And so it was a good exposure for us to see that and to emulate being that way as we got older. That helped me, I know. And I had many friends and kept them for a while after we were out and older.
And when the home closed and you returned to your mom,
Yeah.
you were able to continue at Newman till graduation.
Newman was the bonus. Let me tell you, there was not a better school in New Orleans at that time than that school. And if you were part of the home, it was like a gift. If you had to enroll, you had to pay tuition, and not easy, not a little bit. And so it was really, I guess, the best experience of the home, one of the better ones, that we got to get that kind of pop education. It would be equivalent to a very expensive northern school. In fact, oh, is that mine, Mitchell? Put it off.
Oh, is your phone ringing?
That's what it is. One of the principals at Newman School was originally a principal at a private school in New York called Horseman. So it was really at a level, not only for the South, it maybe was influenced by New York and better areas, more metropolitan. We were exposed to a lot of good things through the school. Very athletic. I know Sam would tell you he was a good athlete, and he used to always be looking for that. And there was always a ball game for the older guys. In the backyard, the structure was such
And you're
that
talking about at the home.
at the home, yeah. The structure of the home was such that there was an inner courtyard with animal kinds of things in it, like a apiary, and some things like animal ant houses. And that's what Uncle Harry exposed me to. That's where I felt special, because after meeting him through his family and the little girl that he was, taking his family, that gave me an open door. So it was very good. But
Excellent.
Newman was a bonus.
Excellent. Sam, tell us about your experience at Newman, and you're going to have to talk about what a good athlete you were now that Betty's
Yeah.
talking about it.
Well, I started in first grade, and one of my classmates was also from the home, Max Markowitz, and we were in the same grade together. And it was, I mean, I had done very poorly going to first grade in Chattanooga. So this was my second time around in first grade. And things went very well, very smoothly. There was no discernible pushing away from the other children. I was part of the group when we played at recess. And those of us who were slightly more athletic than the others became somewhat of a leader, at least during recess. So things went very well for me in school in first grade.
Very good. And you left Newman before you graduated because you left the home. So
Yeah.
tell me about, how did you feel at that time about leaving the home? Were you excited,
Well,
anxious?
I
Was it
was delighted. I was delighted. That shouldn't reflect badly on the home, but to get back to your family, and it was just terrifically happy time for me to go back permanently to Chattanooga and to my family there.
Did
But
it require any readjustment on your part about now being back in a private family with just you as a kid instead of 30?
Well, as I said, I used to, from the time I was 11 on, 11 to 6, 17, I would be in Chattanooga in the summertime. So it wasn't as if I was coming there for the first time. And my cousins, my older family members, my brother, and so it was wonderful for me.
Terrific. And Betty, what was it like for you when the home closed? You left because the home closed, right?
Yeah.
Tell us what
Yes.
was going on then.
Well, I was also not really changing my life to where, where it was drastic. I went with my mother, who I'd been communicating in part of her life anyway, even when I was in the home. And so it was a nice transition for me. And I enjoyed having her and the school and some friends from the home. So it was well-rounded. It was nice. It didn't affect me terrifically. Sam might have been more affected by that because he wasn't from New Orleans, and being in my own area, in my own environment, maybe made everything easier. And being a special child to Harry Ginsberg gave me open doors that the other children didn't have. But Sam, you were always busy. I remember y'all used to get magnolias, break them out of the trees and sell them to people in cars on the street. And my brother was with you. And he was always that. You, Jimmy Whitehead, Jack Solomowski Sawl, and let's see, who else? Charles, Mars Scalca. All those boys were always, y'all were busy guys. I
Now,
was younger and I said, wow, they're doing all sorts of things.
Sam, what were you doing? Taking magnolias and making a little.
Making a few dollars, sure.
Well, one of the items that I have listed as to things that were doable, at the home was indeed, for kids our age anyway, occasionally, if someone could climb a tree and swipe the magnolia, then sell it to the owner of the house, that was kind of fun. and people didn't seem to resent it. But that's one of the items that I have down to, amongst others, to talk about.
Well, I'm curious now that we're mentioning, sort of being naughty or mischievous. Do you recall any discipline in the home that either of you
Uh,
experienced?
yes, there was discipline. I'm sure that I must have been disciplined. I can't, I started when I was 7, so, and I left when I was 16 or 17, so it's hard to remember, but I'm sure there were some occasions where I had, and as others were disciplined, but it's not a memory that I carry with me.
Bettye, how about you?
The girls and my age at that time were more interested in swinging on the swings and singing songs and climbing on these children's athletic bars and things like that. And we were always making up plays. We were drama queens. And so we would decide we would reenact anything that was interesting. And we would listen to the radio and get our ideas from that and then try and reenact them, just like any little girls do. And we had each other to be friends with no effort. It was so easy to get somebody to play with. And so you could, and you know what? I think, Sam, you will agree, you kind of made your way the way you wanted it to be. So that your adjustment time was a lot simpler when you were with these friendly children and they were doing what you wanted. So that made it really good. You were if you were bossy like me.
Did you ever get in trouble? Did you ever get in trouble?
Oh, yeah, I got in trouble,
The question, were you
Yeah, I had animals and the animals were like a cat. I always had a cat stuffed in my jacket. And Harry Ginsberg was a good friend of any animals that we wanted to have and talk about. But I would get in trouble because that cat would do bad things in the dormitory.
Now, one of the things I heard from, I think, every alum or former resident of the home was summer camp. And
Yeah.
for people listening, beginning in 1918, the home sent all the children who lived there to summer camp on the Gulf Coast in Bay St. Louis, Mississippi. Can you each share a memory or two about summer camp? And Sam, I realize some of the summers you were spending back in Chattanooga, but do you recall also some things about camp?
Oh, yes, yes. To begin with, we would take a train to St. Louis, Bay St. Louis, and that was kind of remarkable, when you're 7 or 8 years old. And then there was a pier from the front of the camp into the bay, and we would go swimming every day from the pier. Occasionally, we got a little older, a counselor might take us to the 2-mile bridge and we'd fish off the 2-mile bridge. And that was, again, a big thrill. And also there were woods behind the camp. And I know one of the counselors was very attuned to taking hikes in the woods. And we loved it, at least I know I did. And we would hike through the woods with him. And that was a lot of fun. And there was a stream, I don't know, probably a couple of miles into the woods. And we would just walk right through the stream and do stuff that parents would say, no, don't do that, So it was a lot of fun.
Bettye, what are your recollections of summer camp at Bay St. Louis?
When we would go into the area that he's talking about, which was behind the buildings, it was full of all sorts of things, like people would be growing watermelons. We used to make a special event out of all getting together, little girls. we go get out of the camp around that area, and we would get watermelons and eat them and sit together and sing. So it was a happy time. There was always a baseball game going on with the bigger, older children. And there was a lot of swimming, fishing. They took boats and went fishing. I fished off the pier that Sam mentioned. And that was exciting because the Bay Area, St. Louis Bay, was full of all kinds of fish and animals and squid and this and that. And I was loving that. And so, yeah, and we would walk as a group some evenings, like on a Saturday night, we would walk into town, the whole group, and we would attend a movie. And then when the movie was over, we'd all walk home. Nobody wanted to walk home. You just wanted to slouch down and be lazy.
Yes, I remember the walking to the movie, and
Yeah.
usually with one of the main male counselors, and he would
Yeah.
kid us about, we'd go past the ice cream shop. He'd say, "Okay, who wants ice cream?" And everybody would say, "Yeah." And he said, I was just kidding, you know. And so it was kind of fun. And occasionally we would actually get some ice cream.
Well, I love the way you're recalling camp like it was yesterday. These are very vivid recollections, so they must have been nice ones. Now, before I open this up, and I haven't even looked yet, Lizzie, in the chat box to see what's piling up, and I hope there's lots of questions. But let me ask you, Bettye and Sam, just before we open it up, what kind of legacy, if any, do you think the home left on you? Or were there particular life lessons that you drew from the home that you've applied to your own life and family? Answer that however you wish, sort of just what you'd like to add about your time in the home. Sam, you go first.
I hadn't thought about it in those terms, but it certainly formed me in ways differently than if I'd stayed in Chattanooga. And I would say, not that anything negative about Chattanooga, but I'd say that a lot of the effects were very positive. And in a sense, being away from our families or my family, you're in a little bit, you're on your own. So that builds something in one. And it's not something I've thought about, but there's no question that being there for 10 years made a remarkable effect on me, and I'll probably be the last person to be able to analyze it.
Thank you. Bettye, what do you have to say?
Well, I think by osmosis, the building got me interested in construction, which I did interior with my husband and family. And you couldn't really say that everything that you were open to, you could get some kind of a gift out of, but you had to want to find that. And I think most of the children were independent and did try to do those kinds of things. But for me, the legacy was that I never found that I wasn't always looking forward to the end of the road. What am I doing here, and what am I supposed to be learning? And it was a good experience altogether. It was because it was so broad. When you just lived with a parent, you got one or two personalities to deal with. But when you live with, what was at the end, 130 some odd children, you learn to develop your personality, and you learn to get along with people and make your way. So that's a big legacy for everyone. Yeah.
Those are great thoughts. Lizzie, do we have some questions in the chat box?
We do have some questions in the chat. One of them is, were there Jewish services or Hebrew classes? And were all the residents Jewish?
You want?
Yeah, go ahead, Bettye.
Can we both just answer at the same time, Sam?
No, one of you have to talk about.
Okay, everybody was Jewish. That was a bond. We all bonded each other because we didn't have to deal with prejudice. gone. Did we go have services? Absolutely. We all went to temple every weekend. Some of us were toward conservative, some toward, I don't know, what else was what?
Well, Betty,
Conserv-
the children were divided between the three Reformed
That's
temples
it.
in New Orleans.
Right.
Temple,
True, Sinai and Gates of Prayer.
exactly.
Yeah. And yeah,
And
we learned all the services. We knew what was in the Bible. That was up to the school, the Hebrew school and so forth to teach us that. But no, we felt that. We felt we were religious. We knew when you talked about the Old Testament what you were talking about.
Sam, your thoughts? I'm sure you were a
Uh,
model student in Hebrew school, huh?
Yeah.
I, as most of my peers, didn't like going to Sunday school. At Turo, which where I went, the Sunday school and the what would have been the Saturday services on separate days were all on the same day. So that was some relief because we only went once, not both weekends, both days of the weekend. But I would have preferred not to go. Now, one thing I'd like to say is that when I was living at home in Chattanooga, I lived in a household where my grandmother didn't speak English and I was fluent in Yiddish. And after 4 years at the home, and I came back to Chattanooga in the summer when I was 11 years old, I didn't have a drop of Yiddish. I couldn't understand it. I couldn't speak any of it. So as an adult, I wish that had been different, but I may have even been offered a chance to go to cheder, and I'm sure I would have rejected it as long as it was up to me, because being home and playing was more important than going to any kind of school.
That's right. And you've touched on an important topic in the book and in the exhibition, which is the home was run throughout its 90 years largely by Reform Jews. And there was some talk about trying to honor children of Orthodox backgrounds, but I found no evidence that that ever really occurred, especially not during your time there. Although they did have on the board as honorary members the rabbis of all the Orthodox synagogues as well as the temples as well, in response to the person's question. And next, yeah, go ahead, Sam.
I was going to say, as a child, that didn't mean anything to me, the fact that I could speak Yiddish. I mean, there was no one at the home that I could speak Yiddish to. Nobody tried, and I didn't think about it. And I think something had come up with not just me, but would you like to go to special cheder or something? And of course, given the choice, I said no, but it could have been different.
Mm-hmm. Good point. Lizzie, what's next in the chat?
A question about kind of your later lives. Sam, how did you make it up to the New England area? And Bettye, how did you make it out to California? What were like brief summaries of your life post home, not in the intro by Marlene?
Sam, go ahead.
Was that a question for me? Because I didn't understand it.
Yeah. How did you make it up to the New England area? What brought you to your home now?
How did I meet my wife?
No.
Well, if that's how you got there, just sort of what took you, you went from Chattanooga, and I left out a big chunk of your geographic journey. How'd you end up outside of Boston?
I'm sorry, I hear the words, but I'm missing the.
I think what you've told me is you worked in a number of large chemical companies across the country.
Right. And how did we come by to Boston?
Exactly.
Well, one of our sons and his family lives here, and
your daughter too.
and my daughter too. So it wasn't difficult to be here for that. So we've been here since.
Very good. Bettye, how'd you make it across country?
I made it because I had a husband that was very far thinking and entrepreneurial. And at that time, he wanted to be involved with the stock exchange. And if you were, you would have to buy a seat on the stock exchange.
Well, we had a blind date.
Yes, we did. We had a
and I
blind date.
fell in love.
Is that Willard we're hearing from?
Yeah, that's Willard in the
That's
background.
Willard, yes.
But, so how did you get to California, Mom, is what
Oh,
we're asking.
We got there because Willard had gotten us into Rayco seat covers and Revlon beauty products. Oh, okay. And so we got here because there was a opening for that franchise kind of thing in California. And we did not want to move into Los Angeles in a major metropolitan area where we just weren't ready for that. We didn't want it because New Orleans was a funny town to live in. It was so split into different things. There was, you know, the Catholics, the Roman Catholics, the Jewish, the Irish, you know, all sorts of
How did you go to California? What took you?
Bettye,
Yeah.
You answered it.
what got us to California, Willard. And
Yeah.
we went into Rayco and the construction business. And that's really what there was an opportunity for the first time anybody was franchising, was this very forward-thinking young man. His name was Joe Wolf, and he was opening up areas, and Fresno was open. And we took-
Bettye, just like Sam told us that they moved to outside of Boston to be near family, your family all seemed to end up at some point in California as well. So family was important to being together.
Yeah, very important. I think that's one of my kind of crazies. We learned in the home, you had your family if you didn't have anything else. But I think we felt that we wanted always to be together. And Willard was open-minded and happy to help them get their feet into some areas. And so that's why they came.
And you're talking about your siblings.
Yeah, I'm talking about my siblings, yeah.
Terrific. Terrific. Lizzie, what's next?
I just want to share that there are some people in the chat who somebody asked a question for the group, is if there are any people related to other home residents, and there are some folks in the chat sharing. I'll let people read those later, but I just want to acknowledge that. But another question is, did the two of you speak about your experience at the home freely with your friends, spouses, kids, grandchildren? This person says, my grandmother was in the home and their family didn't know until they found her name in the school archives.
So was it something you discussed with your own children years later, being in the home?
Yes, extensively. And there was no question about it. I guess Eleanor can answer that better than me, but I certainly shared what I could with my family about being in a home. Would you agree with that, Eleanor?
Oh, yes, yes.
So it was something kind of to brag about. I mean, it was unique, but you know, it was who I was, and you want your family to know that and understand that.
Bettye, how about you?
Yeah, I think we did discuss the fact that I was with children and we were in the home, and you know, my children are here behind me. So did I really discuss things with you, Pepper, Mitchell?
You did. You didn't talk to other people about it.
No.
Much, just amongst us.
Yeah, I think it was a family thing.
And
But-
going back to what, go
Yeah.
ahead.
No, it's fine.
Going back to what Lizzie said was in the chat, people were asking about other people related. I know that both of you have either people on the line now, or in Sam's case, people who are interested in seeing the recording later. But I know that there's lots of folks, if they want to identify themselves, you know, be happy to have that happen. So Lizzie, I can't tell, I'm not looking at the chat. And can you preserve the chat for us for later?
Absolutely. I can
Right.
preserve the chat, and yeah, if folks have a reason to reach out to me about, connecting, let me know and we'll figure something out. But additional questions coming in through the chat is, what was a typical weekday? Like, what was a day in the life like? Um, you know, did you have to get up really early? Did you have to fight for the bathrooms? Did you walk as a group as students to Newman? Like, what was a day in the life of someone who lived in the home?
Sam, I'll let you answer it because we were structured as girls living in a dormitory style life. And we did not have, and the structure itself was very well put together and very easy to manipulate what you wanted to do at a certain, but we did have chores. We all pitched in and kind of helped maintain the atmosphere of the home is clean. It was, the kitchen was very, very well preserved and taken care of. I don't think we had any kinds of problems. And the rest of the day was spent going to school, playing with everybody that was a friend or your age, dealing in athletics if you were that inclined, and acting out and playing. And it was just a typical day. It just, it was different from having just two parents. We had a group. And so it was always something to do.
Did you have to fight for the bathroom?
No, huge. There were four toilets or 5 toilets in the one room. I forget. I know there were at least 4. And so the showers, there were 3 or 4 showers, and we were able to just walk in and do it. And nobody was too personally shy. I mean, you didn't exploit everything, but you weren't, squeamish. You weren't.
What if you wanted a snack? Could you go to the kitchen and get a snack?
Oh,
No.
yeah.
Well, let's
I
hear.
said no. I
Sam?
mean, it was so far-fetched that my answer is no, I don't think anybody would do it. Occasionally, we got a little older, we could walk down the block and go into I don't know,
Eating house called.
a bar where they, mostly sold,
Oh, boys, sandwiches.
and
Was
yeah,
it, was it called fees?
we would do that occasionally when we got, I don't know, maybe 13, 14 years old. We could do it. I mean, you wouldn't go there as a 7 or 8-year-old, but our meals were so plentiful, and I think they were quite tasty. And so I don't recall being hungry between meals.
Never, never. There was a place called Fees, and y'all used to, the big boys like you, and they would go at night and they would buy these sandwiches and bring them back to the dormitory. And my brother, who was always looking out for his sisters, would buy them for us. And they would bring them back and we would eat. But you could go in the kitchen and ask whoever, if it was open. The kitchen did close down at a certain time, but if the kitchen was open, food was never a problem. I don't know where they got all the food for, because there was a ration for food during the war. And we had an abundance of food. And they cooked all the time. They had 2 very nice Black ladies that cooked.
One
And
of
they
whose
had
name was Lottie, right?
Lottie.
Lottie
Uh-huh.
Hopkins.
Yes, Lottie Hopkins. You know the history better than we do,
Well,
Marlene.
I just have the papers. You have the very precise memory. So,
Yeah.
Lizzie,
Well, I wish I'd had 20 years in there. I could really understand everything, the politics of how it developed and what his goals were to have what was the goal of the home? Was it to get us off the street, or was it to get adopted? But we all had parents. It was a kind of a mix there. Was called the Jewish adoptive home. It really wasn't.
no, there was adoption was not ever one of the
Never.
no.
Right.
Any
Uh,
last question, Lizzie?
I think
No.
we have time for two more questions. One is another Jewish question. Did you celebrate Shabbat dinner at the home? How was Shabbat like Friday evening?
I think so.
We
It
did.
It
We
wasn't
sat at a
particularly meaning-
table
It
and
wasn't
we,
particularly meaningful to me, but I think that on Friday night, they
yes,
had some service and so forth, but it went right past me. I was totally, didn't care.
no, we were very structured in making the Jewish environment part of our life. They made us, we did have Seder, and we did have, services that we would, say the Lord, the prayers and things like that at the table or, of course, in Sunday school. But you knew you were Jewish if that's what you exposed to, you were.
And our very last question for the night, it's my question. Were there any people that you kept in contact with after leaving the home?
I was in contact with Jimmy Whitehead, and for quite a while after we were both not in the home, and I can't think of Morris Scalca. There was a reunion. I'm not sure what year it was when they had a reunion, and I know Morris Scalca was there. Julie Fruitgarden was there, and I know I was interviewed, and a record was made of it, and Morris Scalca was interviewed, and a record was made, and I don't know about other people.
And
I think
Sam,
Jimmy was there too, I think.
the
Do
record.
you
you're
remember
talking
my
about-
brother,
1 second, Betty.
Sam? Oh, okay.
1 second, Betty. And anyone who's interested, the videotapes that Sam's talking about, you can listen and watch them. They're on the profile of Sam that's on my website based on interviews and photographs, but the particular interviews that were done either by the Institute for Southern Jewish Life or the JCRS, those are on the website. And
That's good to know.
yeah, you can see it. Betty, I'm sorry, you were about to say something.
No, I mean, you asked if we had friends that we had. Yes, my husband and I were friends with Mark's, with one of the other, that his brothers were both in the service and passed away.
Markowitz.
Yeah, Max and Sarah.
Oh,
Yeah, and
I
Sam,
I missed what you said. I couldn't.
I said
Max
we-
Markowitz.
friends from that we carried, that we met
Yeah.
after the home,
Yeah.
very much so.
Yes, we did. Right.
Yeah.
Great. I think that wraps it up, Lizzie. I want to thank personally Betty and Sam for being such important resources for the book, for the exhibition, and for doing this tonight. It was really a pleasure and an honor to get to see you virtually. So Lizzie, you wrap it on up.
Yeah, thank you, Marlene and Betty and Sam and all the folks who made you appear tonight. I really appreciate everybody and all the work that has gone into this presentation. This is not the last program in our Most Fortunate Unfortunate series. The best way to find out what's next is to stay connected with the museum and to sign up for our newsletter, follow us on social media, and in a few days, I'm sure we'll have an announcement of what is next to come. There's a bunch of ways you can engage. I always want to pitch y'all, come to the museum. We're in New Orleans, and this will be open through January of next year. If you want to bring school groups, if you want to bring your Hadassah group, whatever, contact me. My name is Lizzie, Lizzi at msje.org, and we'll bring you to this exhibition because it's fantastic and we want as many folks to see it as possible, especially the folks who are on this call who have personal connections to the home, and this is your story. So thank you all so much for being here. We have programming coming up, all virtual at the museum. We have our Sit a Spell series that starts on July 17th, Thursday, with a program on Jamaica Jews. That's a lunch and learn series, all virtual. And you can find more information at msje.org/events. Finally, you can buy Marlene's books on our museum store, msjestore.org. A recording of all this will be available in the coming days, and we so appreciate everybody joining us here today. Have a wonderful evening, everybody.
July 4th.
Thank you.
Thanks,
And
everybody.
it was nice meeting you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.